Hi, I'm Jack from GatelyAcademy, and in this lesson, steps of the sale, to give you some context for how all of these lessons fall together. So we'll talk about when does the appraisal happen, when's the offer, the purchase and sale. So it'll give you a little timeline to be able to make sense of the entire course. Okay, so the first thing starts off with a lead. Remember, we are a lead business. Generating the lead is the most important part. None of this happens without a lead. So, so many trainings focus on, how do you fill out this form? How do you fill out that form? And that's all important, don't get me wrong, but none of that ever happens unless you can produce leads. So as a new agent, just a quick aside, I'd spend like 90% of my time generating leads because you don't have to fill out the forms if you have no leads. So really super important. Generating the lead, you're going to find somebody that wants to sell, and we'll write this webinar today or this video today based upon getting a sales listing. You got to find somebody who wants to sell and wants to sell with you, right? So you have a listing appointment and you go over to their house, for instance, and you talk to them about their property and they sign a listing agreement. So this is a type of contract between the seller and the agency that you work for. And of course, when you go to a listing appointment, the goal is to get the listing agreement signed. So it's a contract, binding contract. There's going to be a start time and an end time. And it's super important that you bring that back to your office as a signed contract. It's not a done deal that you got the listing until they actually sign the listing contract. You should provide a copy of the listing contract to the seller. Then highly likely you're going to go into a process where you're going to collect a lot of information for your eventual posting of the listing in the multiple listing service. Now, this is not for every single listing, but highly likely you're going to be, if you're in the single family home or condo market, highly likely you're going to be a member of the MLS. So now you have to collect all sorts of data about the property, the heat source, the shingle type. I mean, there's a lot of questions. Many of your agencies will have a checklist or some type of form that you can fill out. Sometimes even like at my agency, we have just this checklist we can use on our phone as we're going through the property. You're going to collect a lot of information. You're going to get the photos, the video, the drone, all of that stuff. You're going to get it actually ready to post on the multiple listing service. Okay, so you've done all your marketing, your open houses, you've knocked on doors in the neighborhood, and eventually you produce an offer, maybe multiple offers, maybe there's some negotiation, but you've got at least one offer which finally the seller accepts. So these two things have to go together, offer and acceptance. Congratulations. Well, not yet, because you haven't made it to the finish line yet, but you're headed in the right direction. You've gotten an offer, your seller's accepted it, and now a kind of a new phase starts. And the next thing right out of the gate, highly likely, is going to be a home inspection. This will usually happen within the next 7 days, sometimes sooner. Every market's different, but certainly within the next 7 days or 10 days or 3 days, something like that. The buyer is going to arrange for the home inspection. It is customary that the seller kind of bend over backwards for the buyer. So when the buyer says the home inspection is going to be Wednesday at 10, the seller really can't negotiate that. It'll be Wednesday at 10. Now, and there are some situations where obviously rare, but where the seller might say, can we do it some other time? But in most cases, that time slot of the home inspection is dictated by the buyer. Simultaneously with this, the listing agent or the listing agency is going to probably draft the first copy of the purchase and sale agreement. So it's highly customary that the purchase and sale agreement is drafted by the listing agent or the listing agency on behalf of the seller. Sometimes we don't draft the final copy until we wait for the home inspection window to close, because sometimes people use the home inspection to renegotiate the price or the terms of the deal. It happens. And so, especially if something comes up at the home inspection, which could be a code violation or a safety violation, and the buyers want it fixed before they move in, or there's something that really needs to get repaired and the buyer wants some type of financial concession. There could be all sorts of kind of like a mini renegotiation as a result of the home inspection. You want to have all that reflected in the purchase and sale, so you're probably not going to send the purchase and sale out for signature until the home inspection process is complete. The purchase and sale process will probably also involve attorneys, at least here in Massachusetts, so it's not unusual that the attorneys kind of get involved at this point. You as the listing agent and or your agency will draft the original first version of the purchase and sale, and then very often here in Massachusetts, the attorneys then get involved in negotiating the final document, which can sometimes be 8 to 20 pages for even your run-of-the-mill single-family home. So very often they'll use the standard purchase and sale that you drafted or your broker drafted for you, and then they'll add on additional sections called addendums. So this is kind of where things get a little complicated. We got attorneys negotiating, and you got to make sure that whatever it is that you negotiated to begin with gets in that final version of the purchase and sale. So keep an eye on these documents as they get updated. You also want to make sure that when you negotiate with the other side, that there's only one of you negotiating with the other side. You want to speak in one voice to the other side of the transaction. You don't want the attorney saying one thing and you saying another. That's not going to work out for your client. All right. After the after the purchase and sale is done, you're going to have the appraisal. And this is another time where the appraiser is going to call you or email you, contact you. They're going to contact you, the listing agent, and they're going to pretty much tell you when the appraisal is going to be. The appraisers, for the most part, are fairly busy. Consequently, if they suggest Thursday at 2, you're going to make every effort to make that happen, because without the appraisal, you can't have the next step in the process, which is the mortgage commitment. Remember, the appraisal is how the bank answers one of the two topics that they can ask you about. They can ask you about your ability to pay, and they can ask about the value of the asset. This is how they ask about the value of the asset through the appraisal. So they're not going to issue the mortgage commitment until they get that appraisal. By the way, very common question, are you allowed to give the appraiser a copy of the P&S? And the answer is yes. It's a good chance they might already have it, but if they don't, you should provide it to them if they ask for it. It would not be a bad idea to have that handy to be able to either give them a hard copy and or email it over to them. I strongly recommend that you attend the appraisal as the list agent. It'll probably be just you and the appraiser, to tell you the truth, in most situations. All right, so the appraisal is done. The mortgage company receives it. They find out that the appraisal must come in at or above the agreed price. We'll talk more about that in one of the other videos. And then they issue the mortgage commitment. As a general rule of thumb, we are now probably 30 days removed from when the offer originally got accepted. So we are a little bit down the road here. Some time has passed from when we originally accepted the offer. This is usually, once the mortgage commitment date passes, this is usually when I feel fairly comfortable about taking the for sale sign down and writing, under agreement or even sold. Remember, I'm not going to be able to have my sign up there after the closing. So we'll probably close in another week or two. And usually I put the sold up there now so that on the day of actual closing, I'm going to remove my sign entirely. So I just don't want the sign to disappear without having had that sold banner at the top for at least a good week or so. So I'm going to change the sign. You do whatever is customary in your area, but this is usually when I put the sold, and usually to make a little social media post out of that as well. So we're almost there. We just have basically 2 more steps, or maybe 3 really. The next thing that's going to happen is the walkthrough. The walkthrough is a visit of the property that is going to occur usually the morning of the closing. So let's just say that you're closing at 10 a.m. Very common to have a walkthrough at 9 a.m. So you're going to meet over there, and I'm strongly recommending that you attend as the listing agent. You should probably attend the walkthrough. There's a lot of agents around here that don't attend the walkthrough. I think that's a mistake, but it's a tour of the property. The buyers make sure that it's free of debris, free of personal property, and free of occupants. And it's usually a 10, 15, 20-minute thing, pretty rudimentary, unless there's a problem. They'll let you know if there's a problem. It's much better to find out there's a problem when you're at the property rather than an hour later when you're at the lawyer's office or the registry of deeds. So if there's a problem while you're at the walkthrough, very likely you could fix it. The seller's left something behind that they shouldn't have. You can pick it up, throw it in your trunk, and bring it over to the sellers, or throw it in the dump, or whatever. But you can usually kind of squash a problem at the walkthrough before it actually mushrooms. And remember, buying a house is very stressful for a lot of folks, and sometimes they put too much emotional energy into something that's really not super important. But in order to kind of get rid of this problem, you fix it up, you clean it up, you take it, whatever it happens to be, you resolve the issue, and then you can go to the closing, which, wouldn't be unusual to be later that morning, let's just say 10 a.m. I'm a big fan of morning closings. Afternoon closings can get a little bit tricky, and sometimes you might not be able to get on record where they actually consummate the transaction until maybe the next day. You don't want to do that. Morning closing is much, much better. Oh, one other point about the walkthrough. I usually go to the walkthrough myself. I'm going to try to get over there actually the day before, say like at 5 p.m. so that when I know that when I get there at 9 a.m., I've already been there the day before at 5 p.m. And so I know that there's not going to be issues. So I sleep better at night. And then I know when I pull up there at the house that I'm selling, everything's copacetic. If there was an issue, I could have fixed it the afternoon before. I could have called the seller or whatever. I'd have a couple of hours to resolve some type of bigger issue. Not that happens very often, but that I could have done that. Nonetheless, 9 a.m. rolls around, you go to your walkthrough, it's probably going to be fine because you checked it the day before. It takes a lot of the stress out of it. Now you go to the closing, fantastic, fantastic. This is usually in Massachusetts where the lawyers are kind of in charge, but every once in a while, you're gonna need to be kind of the leader and inform your clients. So you kind of let the closing take its own life of its own. If you have not been to a closing recently, or you've only been to closings in which you yourself are buying or selling property, I'm strongly recommending that you put it on your list to attend a closing that, how do I want to say this, that you have no interest in. It's just as an observer, just to kind of watch, sit in the corner and just watch everybody. I think that's a great learning opportunity. Lastly, now that you sold the house, congratulations, you want to market the fact that you sold the house, because that's going to create more leads. So whether that's posting it on Facebook with a big sold sign in your hand and a big smile, or whatever, postcards, there's a lot of different ways that you can remind people in the area, remind your base that you sold a house. This is the time to do it, right then and there. Everyone's going to be happy for you, and this is a great marketing opportunity which creates leads, which gets us back to step number 1.